Good morning, everybody. You've all probably started to have the chance to get to know the Bloomberg Philanthropies public health team led by my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Kelly Helling and Dr. Kelly Larson. I lead another group at the foundation, the Government Innovation Team, and we're focused on helping public sector organizations, especially local governments, develop the ideas, the approaches, the skills, the culture they need to be more creative, ambitious, and effective. Innovation as a practice has really taken off at the local government level over the past decade, far more than at any other level of government. It's not a surprise. Local governments are the front line, you're close to the people you serve, you're constantly getting feedback, and so iteration and adaptation is very much a part of the DNA of city leadership. Over the past 3 years, we can really see the way city halls have reached into the innovation playbook, leveraging investments in innovation, data, collaboration, resident engagement in their life or death battle against COVID and in the fight for recovery. Today, I want to share a couple of lessons that we've observed that cities everywhere can use to their advantage moving forward. So this is Mayor Brandon Scott. When COVID first, the mayor of Baltimore in the United States, when COVID first hit, cities realized they needed to quickly and significantly ramp up contact tracing capacity, and many took the approach of calling large consulting firms and farming out big contracts to them and to their call centers. That didn't sit right with Mayor Scott in Baltimore. He and the Baltimore Health Department wanted to go local, wanted to go hyper-local, and they turned to the city's innovation team to lead the way. The I-Team did what innovation people in city halls do all over the world. They scanned the research, they went to the community to gather insights and find partners. They spent time listening to and learning from residents in order to build a team and a program and approach that community members would talk to and trust. The resulting Baltimore Health Corps was a team of 300 contact tracers, care coordinators, and later vaccine ambassadors. That's 3 of them there on the screen. All were hired from among the 50,000 people in Baltimore who lost their jobs in the first few months of the pandemic. They weren't just people who needed a paycheck, they were people uniquely qualified for the job because they were known in the community. And boy, did they make a difference. In a September 2021 report, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health compared Baltimore's COVID experience with 325 counties across the United States with similar socio-demographic profiles. The city ranked 81st percentile for the lowest incidence of cases, 73rd percentile for lowest cumulative mortality rate, and 97th percentile for the highest vaccination coverage. The findings were clear. Baltimore fared better than many of its peer cities. Next up is Claudia Sheinbaum, the mayor of Mexico City, whose team just won an award here today, very exciting. When Mayor Sheinbaum took office in 2018, it was with a promise to make Mexico City a place of rights and innovation. Digital innovation, she said, was how her city would ensure that everyone, particularly the poorest, had access to the health care, the environment, the government services that they were entitled to do, that was their right. Coming out of the pandemic emergency, that promise was especially important in a city where 2/3 of the households saw their incomes plummet during the darkest days of COVID, and infection rates in the poorest communities were five times those of the wealthier ones. That's why Sheinbaum and her team were laser focused on scaling up inclusive digital solutions. It's something I witnessed firsthand when I visited last year. This is the Civil Registry Office. It's the central repository for all vital records, the birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce decrees for everyone in this 10 million person city. However, for so many of the poorest residents, it was next to impossible to access those records, since doing so meant they'd have to take a day or 2 off from work to stand in long lines or pay a bribe which they couldn't afford. Mayor Sheinbaum saw this as profoundly anti-democratic and a major government failure, and her digital agency responded with great ambition, creating the world's first digital municipal ID, which now has 5.3 million users, consolidating 40 city apps that once had 40 different web pages into a single one, building the world's largest free Wi-Fi network with more than 30,000 hotspots, which effectively makes data free and accessible to every city resident. Now, all you need to do if you're a resident of Mexico City to access your driver's license or your unemployment benefits is push a button on your phone. It's radical, inclusive, ambitious approach for making public services real in the lives of everybody. As the saying goes, you go to the war with the army you have, not the army you want. Mayor Scheinbaum and Mayor Scott were able to achieve what they did because they'd already been investing deeply in their city's capacity to innovate and to be agile. The skills were already there and they could be deployed when times demanded it. Speaking of rough and going to war, let me introduce you to Oleg Polvenko, the IT director for the city of Kyiv. In 2017, Oleg and his team created a platform called Kyiv Digital, which lets people use their smartphones to pay for things like public transit, parking, and utilities. By 2001, the app was rolling out new services, had helped during COVID, alerting COVID rates and transit closures and everything like that. Flash forward a year to February 2022, when Russian bombs first hit the city, and Oleg and his team were able to turn that nice-to-have service into something people literally couldn't live without, alerting them to air raids, directing them to the closest bomb shelters, helping them find critical supplies like insulin, food, gas. This is what the 1 million users of Kyiv Digital can find on the platform today. On the left, it's a map of Wi-Fi equipped bomb shelters, and on the right, the incoming air raid alerts. And you know what's most incredible about this story? Oleg and his team were able to transform the platform within 24 hours of the first bombs hitting the city. Kyiv came to the war with the team they have, and that team was ready. Today, they're not only saving lives, I love this, they're also giving people a reason to live. Kyiv Digital has served as a platform for e-democracy, recently helping residents rename 400 streets and parks that previously had Soviet-era names, which is pretty incredible. So this is, without a doubt, a tough time to be in City Hall, to be in city government. The difficulties that started with Trump, with Brexit, were followed by COVID, social unrest, recovery. The challenges keep coming, whether it's migration, inflation, the non-communicable diseases, all of you are fighting so hard to arrest. And that's what makes the lessons, so our status quo today is about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. And that's what makes the lessons coming out of Baltimore, Mexico City, and Kyiv, and so many other cities so important. And it's why I share them with every mayor and city leader who will listen. So you're my captive audience today. So here's the first. For more than a decade, Bloomberg Philanthropies has worked to make service design the norm in city halls. Designers and the skill set they bring approaches around qualitative research to understand people's needs, co-creation to inject and incorporate residents' insights into the services and programs you're designing, journey mapping to help policymakers understand the residents' full experience before they get to the service, during the service, once they leave the service and try to get back home. These approaches, which can bring in underheard and disenfranchised voices, were not standard practice in cities when we started our work, but they had become go-to skill sets in Baltimore by the time Mayor Scott needed to ramp up his contact tracing capacity. When the health department wanted to go local but didn't know where to begin, he sent in the designers, and they gathered a trove of qualitative data that became the foundation for the city's contact tracing approach. These resident engagement strategies later played a critical role as the city developed nuanced testing and vaccination strategies, particularly to reach marginalized communities. I understand many of you are focused on resident engagement. That's excellent. We're now seeing departments like health, housing, transportation, and cities around the world hire in designers to support better policy making. This is a genie we don't ever want to put back in the bottle. The next lesson, there's an amazing man here in London, Charles Leadbeater, who's written that in a crisis, the most effective innovation relies on adaptation, using existing knowledge to repurpose existing services rather than creating something anew. This makes sense. It's the difference between racing from 0 to 100 and making strategic shifts in what you distribute over existing mechanisms or in the way existing users use an existing system. That's clearly what Oleg and Kyiv Digital team did really well by taking the city's peacetime digital platform and redeploying it for its wartime purpose. Of course, that's just the beginning of good service product fit, not the end. A huge lesson coming out of the pandemic. and this period of uncertainty and decreased visibility is the virtue of test, learn, adapt. This iterative approach to policymaking and program design acknowledges that you just can't see everything from your desks, and that tapping resident feedback is the best way to get a full picture. Finally, I think we can all agree that the innovation and policy ambition that we've seen from your cities and many others over the past few years is truly unmatched. Cities were agile and ambitious in the face of all the challenges. They partnered in new ways and with dexterity. They even procured quickly, which I think surprised all of us. At the height of these crises, city leaders made change happen at urban scale in ways we've rarely seen our innovation departments do in normal times. So we have to ask ourselves, as we flatten the curve on all of these crises, will we also flatten the curve on our public ambition and our public innovation? Not if we plan to deliver at scale. When I spent time with Mayor Sheinbaum marveling at the digital transformation in Mexico City, I started to really appreciate that they'd achieved innovation scale by design. It all started with a new law, a regulatory framework passed at the beginning of her term that consolidated everything digital into one single agency that reported directly to the mayor. That agency came to life as she recruited world-class talent, especially from Mexico City's youthful tech population, and it gained credibility and momentum as she notched one win after the next in improving services, all in the name of improving rights and innovation. Mayor Sheinbaum and the city shifted the city's innovation approach from pilots and projects to policy and sustainability. And she laid that groundwork before COVID, which I think shows that we can be ambitious even when we're not under the direct threat of a pandemic or war. So these three lessons, can and should serve any city leader well. Design with, not for residents. Test, learn, adapt. Don't hope for scale, design for it. And here at the foundation, we have a whole team and a crew that are here to support any of your cities that are working to build up your innovation capacity. We'd love to follow up with you. And before I close, I'll just leave you with one final thought. I think if there's anything constant in our world today, it's that nothing stays the same. And many of you, many city leaders today are asking, how do we effectively govern in a state of perpetual change? Part of that answer is building the innovation skills and the tools for agility that I've talked a little bit about today. But another part of it is really the essence of leadership itself and the necessary role leaders like all of you play in envisioning potential futures and asking what if. That is definitely something I learned more than 2 decades ago when I sat in the bullpen with this guy, Mike Bloomberg. That's him in the center there in his one-time office. Mike really was one of those rare city leaders who was always focused on the long term, on potential challenges, on what could happen. That led him to create a pioneering climate plan, prioritize infrastructure investments when no one else was supporting them, and to try to diversify an economy that was way too reliant on Wall Street. It also led Mike to create the government innovation programs at his foundation. Today, we get to work with mayors, a number of you in the room, who increasingly understand that if they're not looking around the corner and planning for the future, no one else will. That responsibility, which is so uniquely yours, presents you with an extraordinary opportunity to create the policies and improve the lives for residents for generations to come. And there's no doubt that the innovation toolkit, and especially a focus on some of the things I've discussed today, can help you make the most of that opportunity in good times and bad. Thank you so much.